Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. I have an interesting story behind today's guest. About a year ago, maybe a little bit more, I received a message when I first got on Facebook and I started posting. And this is even before I became friends with Jim Valiant. And the post suggested to me that I reach out to Derek Lambert. They said he has an interesting story similar to yours and he'd probably be good to reach out to. And he is a friend of Jim Valiant. And like I said, I wasn't friends with Jim Valiant at the time, so that really didn't mean anything to me. But it was still nice of the person to reach out in that way. And it's taken a while, but now we have him here. He has an amazing story to tell. He's a husband. He's a father. He is somebody who has battled with addiction and won. And now he has a very popular podcast, the MythVision podcast. Derek Lambert, welcome.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate the invite. And yeah, thanks to everybody.
All right, I'm going to jump right in here. When did you start using drugs, and what was your life like before then?
Started using drugs. That's an interesting question because I started dabbling as a kid with a little bit of dad's alcohol from time to time, and it was usually around girls. So, you're 6 feet tall when you're 4 feet tall, when you drink a little bit of tequila.
Yes.
And I have an alcoholic father, so I don't really feel like I need to spend too much time on elaborating on that, other than to express that my dad didn't know he was an alcoholic. Military, Ranger school. I mean, he's a badass. Checks off all the boxes. Hero, war hero, special forces, went into 7th group, went the whole way, all the accolades, the whole nine. And he'd come home and he would drink almost every day and black out and stuff. So there was this constant never knowing exactly what your life is going to be like. And dad would mean it when he was sorry, and then he'd do it again and then mean it when he was sorry. So my whole life was a little dysfunctional mentally, psychologically. I didn't know what's stable, what normal. In fact, still to this day, finding balance is a key. Is very difficult for me, because it was always either all this way or either all that way with my dad. He taught us those things in his behaviors. So I say that to say, in answering the question about drugs, I, for fun, at a bonfire, smoked a little weed. My friends, who knew that I was the goody two-shoes Christian at the time, started crying. They started crying and were like, I can't believe you smoked, because they had been smoking. And I guess in their mind, I should never have touched this. Now, I look back and I go, how innocent, how little marijuana, whoop-de-doo. But then, it was just at these little parties, at these let's get high and feel good types of get-togethers, that I would take ecstasy, that I would take some mushrooms, that I would do these things and feel good and enjoy what the kids were doing at the time. They were actual ecstasy pills. This is before Molly had shown up on the scene. And there was different kinds of white naked ladies, blue infinities or turquoise infinities. And there's all these names for different pills. And I was 18 years old, celebrating my 18th birthday, the first time I ever rolled on ecstasy. And I rolled for 2 or 3 days. These were extremely strong. So I would say that's when I started dabbling with these things. When I actually got into opioids or opiates, whichever you'd like to prefer. I mean, it was Percocet at the time. I had a headache at what was at the time, my girlfriend, who's my wife's mom. She was addicted to them. I asked for something for my headache. She gave me Percocet 5 milligram. When I took it, I was on a cloud. I felt warm. I felt complete. I felt the comfort and warmth. And this was maybe a year. Maybe I'm 19 at this time when I first tried it. And from there, I always tried to seek out that comfort. Now, I do think I already was seeking out some comfort through religion, through Christianity with the comforter, but there was something about the experience of the warmth of opioids that brought warmth and comfort and peace, at least temporarily, to your situation.
The word comfort is interesting to me. I had a friend of mine. He was a recovered, addict. He hadn't used in like 40 years or so. But he said whenever somebody asked him about heroin, what it was like, He said, imagine being able to be in a Volkswagen with 20 of your friends and still be comfortable.
Hmm.
And I thought that was just such an apt description because it really conveys what you're talking about. I like what you had to say about your dad and the alcoholism, because with alcoholism you can get away with it without people really knowing, right?
Yep.
When you're a heroin addict, you're out there because it's illegal. You're out there in the streets and whatever. But my grandmother was a raving alcoholic, and it was the same thing. She would get drunk. I'm 13 years old. I lived with her at the time. She'd throw me out, tell me to go sleep under a bridge, and then it was all apologies. I'm so sorry. Here's some
Yep.
money. And the interesting thing is my parents were drug addicts, and my grandmother, as an alcoholic, looked down on them.
Exactly. That's what my
They're
dad did in a way. He used to say smoking pots for losers. He was functional. So he knew how to go to work. And even then, it caught up to him at times where he ended up having to be forced by the military to go to rehab. It was so bad. Sometimes we weren't home for weeks and he'd be in a blackout while he'd be on leave and things like that. But I do remember, the him always downing drugs, always trying to downplay. And then later in the years, because he's a medic, which means they deal with medications in the military, his friends were hooked on them in different kinds of ways, were getting kicked from the military for abusing them. And he himself ended up getting caught up on pills in different kinds of ways, not the same exact ones as me, but
No, but
yeah,
those are
it's
pharmaceuticals, right? Because my
right.
grandmother used to take Ativan like they were candy, but
Mm-hmm.
that's prescribed by a doctor, so that's okay.
Yeah.
Never mind that. Yeah, you're taking twice as much as what you're supposed to, and you're chasing it down with a pint of vodka.
Yeah.
So that's just something that's always stuck in my head. From when I was a kid, just the hypocrisy of the whole thing. And the interesting thing was, me growing up, my parents were heroin addicts. Everybody knew I had a screwed up childhood. My father, growing up, his parents were wealthy. They had the dog, the nice house. To everybody on the outside, this is a perfect family. And my
Mm-hmm.
father's misbehaving. And it's like, why would this kid misbehave? He has this great family. But meanwhile, he's coming home to his mother drunk, passed out. But the stigma just wasn't there. So at what point and for what reasons do you think you escalated from the I don't want to say it's not over the counter prescription drugs onto the heroin? Or if you went to something else first, that if you went to coke first or oxycodone, whatever.
No, it's a great question. It was definitely pills forever. Heroin, that's for losers. You know what I mean? That's for losers. It's amazing, isn't it, how that works? I I think what happened is years of doing the pills, Percocets just didn't quite work. They worked when you'd get off of stuff and try to get clean for a few months and you'd get on your feet and then you start back. You could do the perks for a while, but I had already progressed in my addiction in realizing what are called opanas, oxymorphone. And of course, this is around the period when I'm really dabbling into the stronger forms of opioids where they were, it was right before OC, Oxycontins, Oxycontin 20s, 15s, 10s, 40s, and 80s. Those big green pills were made into a formula that could not be crushed. So I was doing them at the time, right before the is the FDA, whatever, they like shut down making Oxycontin crushable. So I'm sitting here sniffing, we called it tooting. We'd toot these pills and get high. And then someone introduced these opanas to me, oxymorphones, which is a mixture of like morphine type of, I don't know the actual chemicals, no chemist here, and I'm not aware of all that goes into them, but you swallow them, they don't do anything. They're dookie. But if you toot them, it takes you to the moon. And I would say I'd nearly overdosed several times doing them. And I don't just say I know I nearly overdosed. I'm vomiting for days, and sometimes it would take me to a level where I was so sick. And it was not just the little sick you'd get from Percocet; it was the beyond kind of sick that oh my god, my body, what did I do? And I was doing those. They started getting expensive, and they're more difficult to find. And finally, you're paying $1 a milligram, and you're dealing with 80 milligram or 40 milligram, depending on what you're finding. And I just didn't have money like that. I'm not made of money. My family's not rich. They were military, you know, a set pay of what they did. And I'd even be caught stealing money from them. I'm giving you a whole bunch because my story is dense and there's a lot
Hmm.
of layers. Several times I've been caught sneaking their ATM card and trying to steal money, or finding money out of their purse, or stealing something to try and pawn it and make the money. But I could not afford to do the amount that would get me high one day. And the dope dealer at the time was like, look, man, I know you have a stigma toward heroin and you think this is bad. It's really no different than what you're doing. Now, it is. I know that now looking back, but in a sense, it isn't, in a sense. So the difference was that this was, I would say, more potent, and it was more affordable. So what happened is I only sniffed. I never injected. I only would sniff. I'd been to detox before that. The doctor told me, you have the disease of addiction. You really, really need to take my words and follow the program, because I checked myself out early. And he was trying to warn me. He's like, man, I'm telling you, you went from swallowing pills, years later, now you're sniffing them. Now you're doing this. You've stolen to do this. You're an addict. And I thought, I just made bad choices. I'm not an addict. I didn't want to believe that about myself. I'm going to 12-step rooms. I'm going to AA, NA, doing the whole nine, and I'm getting clean. And then I'm relapsing. I'm getting clean. Then I'm relapsing. Well, I'm bouncing around here to make the point that one day when I went to go get the pill, I had to split it with a guy. I tooted half the pill and I was not happy. The next day I only had like $15. I didn't even have enough to barely get unsick. So at this point in your addiction, for those who are addicts who know what opioids do, it's not just about getting high, even though you want to achieve that. You will get sick. You cannot not use. You have to use to keep your life going. Life completely stops if you don't, and you're miserable. The most misery, fever, flu symptoms times 10. So the guy goes,
Yeah,
listen,
never
I've
mind
got
the
some heroin.
diarrhea.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And he's like, look, man, I've got some heroin, and this heroin is more powder form. So you can actually sniff this. You don't have, it's not gooey, it's not tar, it's none of that. And I'm like, and he gives me a small little bit, says, trust me, I'm telling you. And he puts it out, and I just do a little, and I'm scared. Barely did a little just to see. In about 15 to 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. And I'm going, okay, you were right. Okay, it's not killed me. It's definitely taken away the sickness already. Wow. This was for losers. Now I'm doing this. It can't be for losers. And then a day came when I didn't have enough to get high or even unsick off heroin. So your money plays a factor into like, how low will you go in order to get it? And he's like, listen, for $10, you can get high by injecting this. And I'm scared of needles. So you can see the progression. I'm so terrified. I asked my brother to help me because I am terrified. And he had already started doing this. He helped me to inject $10 worth of heroin. Injected me. I was nervous. My heart was pounding. I thought, well, I'm going to die. Who knows what could happen? And then I experienced that comforter. And that's when I went, oh my gosh. And I started overcoming my own phobia of needles to a point where I'm willing to see blood drawn into a syringe. And I never would have ever, but because of the reward in the end of what I was trying to achieve, I was going down darker and darker paths, to the point where if I didn't have a syringe, I might reuse my older syringe. You start to do whatever you have to do to keep doing these things.
When you talk about the comfort that the heroin brings, or when you talked about, sneaking drinks when you were a kid, and I'm guessing that people who aren't addicts don't fully appreciate it. Like for me, using drugs, I mean, it wasn't a matter of I'm okay and let me do drugs and get a little comfortable, right? My
Right.
self-esteem was garbage. I couldn't talk to girls. I go to a party, I'm in a corner. You give me a little bit of booze, I'm talking to everybody now. You know what I mean?
I
I'm
know.
scared to death to fight anybody, but I wanted to be a tough guy. But you put that liquor in me, and now I'm mouthing off to everybody wherever I go. So it gave me that sort of liquid courage, they call it. The booze did. And the other stuff, whether it be, marijuana, the Xanax, all allowed me to escape the reality that was myself, right? I
Mhm.
didn't want to live with it. So when you go from that state, from this miserable state of almost self-terror to a feeling of comfort, it's just such a relief. Like relief isn't even the right, it doesn't capture
Right.
exactly what you're mentioning. And like I told you before we came on, I'm going through some pretty stressful family stuff right now. And I thought the other day, you know what, man, I could just smoke a little bit of weed and I'll feel better. It'll take the edge off for a little while. But then it occurs to me, you know what? It's only going to be a little while. And then that's going to go away. And
Mhm.
then you're going to be right back having to face the same problems again. And now you've set the precedent of going to this alternative to escape.
Mhm.
And it's going to be the same thing. I'll do that. Then 6 months from now, that weed's just not going to cut it. Right. And then
Right.
bang, bang, bang. And then in increments, you go from a place of looking at, I'll smoke some weed, but I'm never going to be like one of these goddamn dope fiends. And then you're right in the middle of
Exactly.
it.
The very people you kind of look down upon, you become.
Yes. And it happens so like you don't even realize it's occurring.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it gets to a point where now you accept it. And what I want to ask you next is about a tipping point. Now, for me, my tipping point was I was in prison. I had a 33-year prison sentence, 2004. So I was 7 years into it. I went in 97. So when you're describing Oxycontins, I've never seen one. I've
Hmm.
never seen ecstasy. I mean, ecstasy was starting to come out when I was
Right.
out, but I never saw it. I just heard about it. But one day I was in prison, and while I was in, I was reading, I was getting educated, and it just occurred to me one day, I was sitting there and I said, you know what, man, if I ever want a life for myself, if I want to be able to look myself in the mirror, this has to stop. Like every conversation, I'm calling home, begging my parents, bring me heroin, send me some money. And I just made that decision. I said, I'm done. And I went to a program on a Saturday morning. It was about a 10-hour program for violence, anger management type thing. And I got back, and my cellmate had lines of heroin spread out on the desk. And I said, no, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. And I haven't done it since. And that's going to be 20 years ago in May.
Wow.
And I just, in my experience, everybody that changes, there's a tipping point. There's a reason for it.
Yeah.
What was your tipping point? When did you just say, you know what? Fuck this. Enough is enough. I want out of this lifestyle.
I think that humans are very complex. We have layers of who we are and what we want that are going on at the same time. They talk about it and we use kind of metaphors or we tell stories like the two wolf story. There's two wolves in you. One is good and one is bad. Both are hungry. Which one are you going to feed more? These are analogies to describe, I think, the psyche of what's going on in the human experience. And for me, I wanted to get clean, but I didn't want to get clean. I wanted to stop doing heroin, but I loved heroin. It was destroying my life, but it was making my life better. It was a contradiction, a living contradiction that I was in. And I really wanted everything better. I didn't want to suffer anymore, but I wanted the comfort. I wanted that experience. And so I wanted both at the same time. And I remember one of the tipping, planting of the seed situations. I wake up early in the morning. I'm sick. My brother's sick. We know the dope dealer doesn't wake up till 11. It's 7 a.m. He's already pissed at how many times we've gone knocking on his window or tried knocking on his house or like coercing him into making something happen. And I don't even have money. So I'm bothering this dude who can't stand these fiends. By the way, just for those who are interested, the dope dealer that I had is overdosed and dead. He mixed up his cocaine and his fentanyl and ended up ODing. And he ended up doing the wrong stuff and died. But he was on that track to die anyway. He was using his own products even back when I was doing this. Years later, OD'd. So the point is he looked down upon us fiends, but he would still kind of try to show us some love. That morning, I did everything I could to try and get some. Finally, he picks up. I'm begging him, dude, please, I will figure out a way to get you 20 back. Just front me something. I take half of a Suboxone strip, which to keep me from being sick. It's putting me in the precipitated. I finally go to his house. He gives me a 20 bag, which was useless now by the time the Suboxone had kicked in, because it's going to block the receptors from allowing me to experience the full width of the whole thing. And while I'm in the back seat of the car, I spill some of the heroin onto my sweatpants. I'm over here sucking the juice. Just why not at this point? And I get the little bit that was still left in my spoon. I'm crying because I've gone through this whole bullshit morning. And I just looked down and I noticed in the spoon, I kind of saw myself. And then I looked at my brother and I said, how did we get here? We were the shit, man. We were high school jocks types. We were very athletic, friends of everyone. We were like top 3 in every sport of everything we ever did, from soccer, football, wrestling, basketball, baseball. I mean, everything. I ran triathlons in Puerto Rico. My dad's like expectations are way up here. Like, you better be the best, son. Like, that was my whole life. And here I am looking at my reflection in a heroin spoon in the backseat of a car going, you're better than this. But it didn't end yet. But I started telling myself inside, the end is near. You have to end this near. You're going to die. And then I had this day where I'm now kicked out. My wife kicks me out. I'm giving you the whole full skinny here, but this is important as to what did it for me. My wife kicks me out of our house. I can't live there. She found needles. It's not just that. The Department of Social Services, DHS, whatever you call them, someone called them and told them that I was using heroin and that my kids are around this and they potentially could take my children. Wife was doing the right mother thing and the right thing, period, and said, get the fuck out. So I get out. I get out of the house and I'm staying with a few people that are finding any and all ways to try and make money. We're stealing from pawn shops to pawn to another pawn shop down the street. Like, literally, we were taking subwoofer bass things and stuff and trying to go down the street just to pawn it to another pawn shop. She was scamming old man and stuff and finding ways to get money. Like, just, you get the point. It's just really, really crazy. So I'm sleeping on their couch. We're eating box of noodles each night because they have no food in their house. I'm used to eating. Like, life was good, almost like the parable of the prodigal son. You wake up in the pigsty in a foreign country and you go, it was better back home. But part of me still wanted to use. So I made up this elaborate tale one morning and I called my mom and I said, listen, I was fronted $140 from the dope man. And I gave him my ID. He knows our address. And he said, if I don't get that money, I'm shooting up your house. And, there's the risk of my family being killed. Like, I'm desperate, willing to make up bullshit on top of bullshit. And my mom, I try for hours and hours and hours. And finally she goes, because she knows something's not right. But then at the same time, she's starting to believe my story. Like, I'm finally getting through after hours of bullshitting her. And long story short, she says, I'll pay the $140, but your brother has to be the one who gives it to him because I don't trust you with the money. And I'm like, all right. Kurt's been clean for a week or two, but Kurt ends up using with me, right, to go get this dope from the same guy who looks down on us. And we go to get a gram. And my mom says, though, in order for you to do this, because I'm already so sick and tired of doing this shit and making up lies and having to constantly, with all my effort, find a way to do another one. And I know tomorrow's another day. Like, I'm already starting to realize every day, another day of this has got to keep coming. And I'm hating my life. I want to die, but I'm too afraid to kill myself. Like, it's so unbelievably torturous what I'm doing to myself and others. And I hate myself and I think they hate me. And I'm like, I just don't think there's any reason for living any longer. Like, that's how far it is. And my mom goes, son, if you go to this lady's house to get clean, I'll pay it. I'm like, all right, absolutely, I'll do that. And I'm thinking in my head, yeah, I'll go over there and I'll give it an effort. I'll show up, but in a few days, I'll find a way to get him to run something out there to the country to me. I'll figure something out. Anything to get that 140 right now, because we live in the now.
Yeah.
We don't know tomorrow. We only know now. That's why recovery talks about one day, one moment at a time, because they understand this. They understand the psyche of the now. Well, I end up going to her house. And I'm thinking in my head, I got my phone. I've got a little bit of something. I could get some of these cottons. I could suck up what's in these cottons and try to get a hit maybe by tomorrow if I'm sick. And I stay at her house. This is out in the country. I have no vehicle. My car has not been paid, my truck. It's like 3 months behind. It's about to be repossessed. I've got Department of Social Services ready to take my kids. I'm on probation for theft that I had committed, which was almost grand larceny. It was almost $10,000 that they claimed, even though that wasn't how much. It didn't matter. I owned up to it, confessed as being guilty, took it on my shoulders, and now I'm going to a supervised but not overly supervised probation. And now I'm having to go and check in with them, and they're going to end up piss testing me. And I need to find a way to either condom that or pass the piss test. So I have all these layers. My wife is not happy with me. My family doesn't love me in my head. Everything is falling apart. And I'm just like, where else can I go? I mean, I could go lower, but like, dude, you're already getting to your bottom. Like, what are you going to do? So I'm out of the house, and there's this moment of like, just get clean in my head. But then there's the other moment going, no, you're about to hit withdrawal. And I can't remember exactly the chronology, but this is important psychologically what happened while I was there. My mom and dad show up the next day. I'm about to go into withdrawals. And we're sitting at the table, and I remember my mom just looks at me and she goes, Derek, I love you, son. And I'm like, I love you too, Mom. But like, I'm cold hearted. Like, it was almost like that John chapter 21 scene where Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? And everybody preaches on that thing. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I love you. I love you. And she's just like, no, son, you don't understand how much I love you. And I'm like, I love you too. And it starts to like break through a little. Like, it starts to go through that cold shell of, I don't really think these people fucking love me at this point. I've destroyed their life. I've made their life miserable. I've made my life miserable. Why should anyone love me? And then Mom told me a third time, and she's, just letting me know, like, I fucking love you, son. Like, that will never change. And I could tell that did something. That did something in my heart. And it was like, you have all the reason in the world to fucking do this, man. Do it. In my head, it was the wolf that was hungry, that was good. He came up and I handed him a steak. And I said, we have to win. I told that wolf, we have to win or I'm dead. And I even would pray. I did everything you can imagine. I was just like, if there's something out there, at this point, and of course that gradually my whole understanding of God has changed since then. But like, I'm at the desperate foxhole state. Something's got to change. And over the days of withdrawing, I put myself into precipitated withdrawal with a half a Suboxone. I never took it again since then, but that put me into the worst kind of withdrawal all night. I'm kicking and turning, finally closed my eyes and like try to get lost into a place where I'm no longer thinking of the anxiety and the twitching in my back. And I've gone to the tub 20 times that night. There's no more hot water. I'm freezing cold. I'm hot, the whole nine. And then I wake up and the sun's up. And I go in there and I get a small cup of coffee and I sit down and I talk to the lady, Elise. And I just started to try. I had to put effort in. I started to try. About 4 days in, I left the house and I went home with my wife and I was looking for signs, like anything the universe could tell me to try and like give me you're in the right direction. And on the front page of the newspaper that day, there's an arm with a syringe and a belt, and it was saying something like heroin epidemic in North Carolina, blah, blah, blah. And it was a guy in there, when I read it, describing the experience of heroin. And he described it as if God comes down with a warm blanket, wraps it around you, like pulling out a blanket. The way I would describe it is like pulling a blanket out of a dryer right after it comes out. And you're kind of in that comfort. I could go to sleep feeling, and then wraps it around you and it's like, it's like that. Well, that's how he described it. And I could totally relate. I met the guy who was in the newspaper, went to the meetings, met him, became friends with him. He came over. We used to hang out, all that. But I started getting serious about it, went to 12 steps. And that, I would say, that broken, hopeless, absolute, what the hell, something inside had to change. And I don't know how to give that to people. I wish there was some way I could go, there you go.
You can't.
I wish. Don't you wish?
I do. But think about this. You've got on one side DCF breathing down your neck. Your marriage is falling apart. Your wife kicks you out. You've got legal problems. You're feeling like shit about yourself. You're lying to everybody. Can't afford to pay for the dope. And then on the other side, there's heroin. And it's like, huh? And it's the easiest problem in the world to solve. Not easy, simple. Get rid of
Yeah.
the heroin, everything else fixes itself. But I don't want to get rid of the heroin. And
Yeah.
one day I was in a meeting. I don't remember if it was a 12-step meeting or what, but the counselor asked the question, who in here likes heroin? And I'm looking around and no one said anything. And I said, I do. Like, that's why I used it, because I liked it.
Right.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have used it. I don't like the consequences. I don't
Right.
like what comes with it. But to sit here and say, no, I never liked the way that it felt, that's just a goddamn lie.
Right.
Right. But,
Yep.
when you were telling your story about the craziness, you've got the dope dealer who looks down on the guys buying from him, right? But this guy's using himself and ends up
Yep.
dead. It just reminds me just how crazy that whole life is and how normal it seems. And I remember one time I was dope sick and I had $90 and I went to a dealer and I said, listen, can you give me 10 bags for 90, which is standard. That's not a big deal back then anyways. And he said, no, you want 10 bags, you got to give me $100. Month or so later, I was selling. That same guy comes to me now with his kid's car seat begging, dude, can I give you that? No, no, not after what you put me through. But it was just the craziness. And then I remember
Yeah.
I was in a dope house and I called this girl to come pick me up. And she was a registered nurse. So she comes over, she walks in the house. One dude's out there, he's got his works in his hands, his arms tourniqueted up, there's spoons all over the place. And I'm not thinking anything of it. It's normal to
Yeah.
me. She brought me outside and she said, what the hell are you doing? I could lose my license for being here. And I'm like, I don't know. It's just, this is my life. It's normal to me because
Yeah.
that absolute craziness just becomes acceptable. You don't even realize how nutty it looks to anybody else with a halfway rational mind.
You're
So,
not lying.
so
I had the dope dealer move in at one point into my house. He lived there for probably 3 to 5 months or something. And when he would leave to go make a sale, I knew ways to get into the room and I would be a little ninja and find his baggie. And because this was light tan colored type heroin, I'd try to get a little tiny little chip off a piece because I was desperate and had no money that day. And I'd go outside and get sand and put sand in it. And the next day, when I was able to get money to buy dope, I would look at the bottom of my spoon and see the sand that I'm injecting the fluids from because I had gone and tampered with his
oh
bag.
God.
Like, dude, you get what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
it's pretty funny, but
it's insanity. It's just
it is.
the life just becomes insane. So, how long have you been clean now, and what are the strategies you employ?
Oh man, there's so much you can do. I don't know if this is the only. There's so many
No, of
things you
course not.
can
But
do.
what do you do?
I went to meetings at first. And now I have no problem going. I haven't been in a long time, but like I have no problem going. I'll hold the hand of my brother if he needs to go. I'll hold the hand of my sister if I need to. I'm extremely busy. It's difficult to find time, but if I went, I had no problem. I would use God as an acronym for group of drunks, right? I would look at it as the people, the social is what actually I think is what saves you. I no longer have a theistic outlook. So I once was a believer in God, and now in a sense, the way I would describe it as we talk about metaphors and giving analogies about the two wolves, it was like I was walking this journey of valley and hill over and over of looking for God and finding in the darks and the highs of life. And I'm looking for God and I'm exploring different ideas, exploring deeper into the religion of Christianity and all of its different denominational aspects and things. And finally, I get like to the end of this road, so to speak, and there's a mirror. And it's a high mountain. You get up there and you're like, I'm going to find God. And then you see yourself in a mirror. And it's you the whole damn time. It's like the two footprints in the sand. I carried you when you were weak. And you're like, yes, Lord, you carried me. Yes, Lord. But there's always two footprints in the sand. And you find out it was you who carried you the whole damn time. That is my experience. And I found that it was the people, it was the human beings, it was the mother, the father, the wife who had my back. It was my children. It was the group of men, women, and everybody else who sat there and went, my name's so-and-so, and I'm an addict. And I used to sell my ass on the street corner. And I go, oh my God, that's worse than what I've done, right? You find things, just giving you an example, and they're not ashamed and they lay it out there. And then some people come in with shame. And then some people come in and they have pride and they have 20 years and they're going, I can do it. Anyone can do it. And you're like, it's like an amazing self-help kind of, dude, this is an amazing room. And they consider things like miracles and all that. And I look at it like, this is the closest thing to a miracle you can get, in my opinion. And it's amazing and it's powerful. But I think that when you really come to understand how deep, how complex, and how powerful the human psyche really is and what we're capable of, imagine what we had to survive in evolution. Imagine the beasts and creatures we had to fight to win, to eat. We did some shit in history as humans, and we still are doing shit. So let's overcome. And that to me, man, that's my philosophy. But that philosophy changed over time. In fact, early on, it was God. I prayed, and I don't knock anyone. That's your thing. I get it. What happened is I heard this bodybuilder from Russia on a TV program tell this parable, so to speak, like this story. And he says there was a wise man who was pondering on his past, present, and his future while traveling through the wilderness. And as he's traveling, behind a cactus, a lion jumps out and starts to chase him. So he's running for his life. And as he's running, he's looking back, and that lion gets closer each time. He turns back, it's getting closer each time. And then he turns back, and it literally hits his ankle, and he starts to fall over the edge of a cliff. And as he's falling down the cliff and he's trying to grab on for dear life, he finally grabs a hold of a root that's hanging out of the side of the mountain. And as he's hanging there and he feels the pain of what scraped and all the pain that he had, he looks down. There's a lion at the bottom of the mountain looking up at him like he's food, going back and forth, just waiting for him to fall. So he looks up, and the mountain at the top's looking down at him, and it's going back and forth. And he knows if he goes down, he's going to die. But if he goes up, he's going to die. And then at that moment, while he felt the sharp pains in his hands, he was wondering what that was. He looked, there's thorns on the roots that are sticking out on the side of the mountain, cutting deep into his hands, and blood's dripping down his arms. And at that moment, while he's experiencing that pain, he looks on the root. There's a blackberry. And he eats the blackberry. And it's the best blackberry he's ever tasted. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, and then, and he's like, the wise man is you. The lion that chased you was your past. Up at the top is your past. The lion down there is your future. And while the moment can fucking suck, find a blackberry. Look for it. Make yourself try to look through all the shit storm you're going through right now and eat the blackberry.
That's awesome.
Because it's there.
I like that. So what led you, now you've got this MythVision podcast, and I got to tell you, I've got 501 subscribers. I look at you, you got like half a million. I'm like, damn, I got to get there. But what led you to the topic, or the genre rather, MythVision?
Well, you could tell that even in the story I just told you, there's meaning. None of it happened. None of that is literal, but it can be literal. It can be literal if you understand it for yourself to mean something to you in your experience we call life. But the story is fiction. So my point is I used to literally believe in the Bible. Like it's what happened, literally. And what happened is my early recovery days, I loved exploring ideas and stuff. And I came across videos that compared Jesus to other figures that I had never even heard about. I mean, I heard, but I never really knew about. And I didn't give a crap about trying to compare because Jesus was the only way. There was a lot of deep meaning and emotion and comfort that came with Jesus in my past experiences when I'd bounced between alcohol and drugs back to religion to get clean and sober. And Jesus gave me that warmth and comfort. The Holy Spirit, I would call it, gave me the warmth and comfort that I would kind of analogize to the heroin or the opiates or the alcohol, especially with worship music going. And I was on fire for Christ and things like that. I felt on a pink cloud, somewhat like early recovery people get on a pink cloud, and they feel like this is it. So I started to realize that the things that I was taught, I wanted to question them. It was actually while I was dying from addiction that I started going, man, obviously my beliefs just, they don't work for me. Like something doesn't match up in my life. And I just keep going through this cycle of back to religion, back to alcohol, back to, heroin and opiates. And I just kept going through this cycle. And I didn't think they were the answer for me. Like I thought that religion was when I went there. And then I found meaning and purpose in these things, but it wasn't it. And I thought maybe I'm wrong. What if God's bigger? What if these ideas that I'm hearing online actually bring truth, that other religions are also tapping into something that is ubiquitous in humans and is true across the board for humans? Why do I only think this special one, Christianity and Jesus, is it? So I started studying and realizing, whoa, there's a much bigger picture here that I had no clue about, and God got bigger. God wasn't just the God of Jesus and this and that. To me, it was like, actually, maybe there's a God or gods that's expressing themselves through the world religions. As I studied, it reminds me of I don't know if you heard the Six Wise Men of Hindustan poem by Godfrey Sachs.
I don't think I've heard it. No.
Oh man, if you haven't heard it, you have
No.
to. Can I read it to you?
It's funny. In prison, I studied a lot of religions, but I thought I did. But seeing what you've done, wow. Yeah, sure. Read it.
Okay, this really impacted me even well before the time I started to deconvert. And so it's called Blind Men and an Elephant by John Godfrey Sachs.
This I've
It was
heard.
Six
Yes.
Men of Hindustan.
Yes. Read it.
Learning
It's
about,
excellent. Yeah.
huh?
I've heard it, but read it. It's
Yeah.
excellent.
It was 6 men of Hindustan to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy the mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "Bless me, it seems the elephant is very like a wall." The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, "Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me 'tis mighty clear, this wonder of an elephant is very like a spear." The third approached an animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, then boldly up and spake, "I see," quote he, "the elephant is very like a snake." They all are describing this elephant totally different. One is like a tree, one is like a rope. And then this is how it ends. So these men of Hindustan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion exceeding stiff and strong. They're debating, they're arguing about who's right. Mine's a snake, mine's a tree. This is what this elephant is. And it says, though each was partly in the right and all were in the wrong. So often theologic wars, the disputants I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prate about an elephant not one of them has seen. And so I went, whoa. What if like Christianity is describing God as a wall? And what if Judaism kind of understands God as a tree? And what if Hinduism is kind of seeing God as this multifaceted thing, but it's a I don't know, it's a something with multiple aspects to it, and everybody's trying to guess, but they've never seen it. They don't really know what it is that they're trying to tap into. So that's when God got bigger for me. And I wanted to understand the Bible as it was written and what they were actually meaning when they wrote it. That's what led me into MythVision. So then I started to expand and realized, oh my gosh, the Bible's loaded with mythologies, legends, things that didn't literally happen, can carry significance and meaning, as we've talked about some of the analogies or parables or metaphors. And then some of the stuff's just dated and wrong. I mean, today, we might have thought it if we were a Jew living in Israel in 800 BCE, but that's not a timeless thing. And so you learn to cut out the fat and eat the meat, chew the meat, spit the bone. That's what I do with the religions, is I try to find the good, find the ugly, and point it out, and also show, hey man, you don't have a monopoly on the world of what's right, what's wrong, what's true. And I go after the old me's. I was a fundamentalist. I thought I was an apologist at one point who thought this is the truth and I'm going to prove it to the world. I'd debate online and stuff. When I'd go through my phases of being off drugs, I'd be in the freaking Jesus stuff, man, staying up debating all night. And then one day I relapsed again. So I found, as I deconverted, more balance. I found a balance that it was me and getting comfortable in my own skin, not thinking like the Apostle Paul talks about, the flesh is evil. This is a wicked world. And no, no, no. Actually, I found out addiction was a disease, not a demon possessed or spiritual. There's secret ghosts or monsters trying to get me. No, no, no. There's real science behind this. And then it goes even deeper with other aspects like sexuality. Golly, that was such a hard one. Pornography, these things that they kind of make you feel shame and guilt over that are totally normal, and they are all part of us. Why do we shame our own, existence and natural inclinations on that degree that it's harmful psychologically? So that's, I do all of this to try and help others see like freedom. There's a lot more freedom when you don't have a box that you live in. And yeah, but I just, that's kind of a little bit of why MythVision exists. Now I want to educate people.
Awesome. Okay. So where can they find you? I mean, I
I'm on
know they can
YouTube.
go MythVision, but I'm guessing do you have a website, or I saw another YouTube show I think that you do as well.
Yeah, I've got so 3 YouTube channels. Just Derek Lambert is like, you could see me withdrawn on the couch 5 days off heroin the last time I
Oh,
used. That's on my Derek Lambert YouTube channel. And that one, I think almost 1 million views. People watched and they could relate. Then there's a day 7. I look like a 60-year-old Justin Bieber with like yellow teeth, wasn't taking care of my hygiene or nothing, man. And I'm sitting there telling you, you can do it. I'm already 7 days and I'm motivated. And I'm telling you, I was feeding the good wolf and me keep self-talk, the positive talk, making videos. That helped me stay clean. Seeing those comments from people that were encouraging, ignoring the negative ones as much as I could. Very difficult to do when you're new to YouTube and you see negative comments, but focusing on the positive, and that helped me. So there's that. And then I have 2 YouTube channels, MythVision Podcast, MythVision TV. They're practically the same, except MythVision TV, I'll like take all my documentaries and make really long movies out of them. And you can just binge watch endless mythological scholarly material dissecting the Bible. And I'm going to be
awesome.
covering other stuff in the future.
Awesome. Well, listen, thanks a lot. You've got a very inspiring story, especially for me, because I want to be where you are in the YouTube and the podcast space. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a great day. Uh,
Thanks, brother.
for now, this is the Rational Egoist, Michael Liebowitz, signing out. Remember, let me know your comments, your likes, your dislikes. I want to hear them. Till next time.